Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing outstanding. How about you?
Doing fine.
Glad to have you back.
That's right. You did the podcast completely by yourself last week.
Yeah, we'll have to see if anybody tunes in again.
How did that go?
I don't know. We'll see how many people show up today. Then I'll tell you.
How did you think it went?
No, it was cool. Derek's usually a good guy to talk to. He has a lot of knowledge. So it was a fun interview.
Yeah, it's cool to learn about the stuff that certain attorneys are doing to fight for the Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and to learn that there are in fact actually pro 2A attorneys out there, because probably by and large they're probably one of those demographics of people that statistically are not as pro 2A as maybe some of your more average people.
Mm-hmm.
But there's Derek, and of course Andrew Branca to be another attorney. You got the whole Prince Law Group and those guys. You got even Doug Richards, who's a local attorney here. I mean, I know of several attorneys here in Colorado that are all pro 2A attorneys. Heck, we've got Russell. Russ. What's his last name? He's a follower of ours. Has the Fire and Patriot channel.
Yeah.
Crap. I'm sorry, Russell.
Not do.
Yeah, Duty. Isn't it Duty?
I think so. Yeah.
Russell Duty. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. Sorry. But lots of pro 2A attorneys out there, I can think of another one. Guy, what's his last name? Out of Indiana. Guy starts with an R.
You're breaking my brain, man.
I'm breaking your brain. He's somebody he actually has like a radio show or something, more of a local one there, I think, in like the Indy area. And I've been Guy Relford, there's his name. I've been wanting to get him on our show for some time, because I think he's got some unique perspectives on things. Anyway, it was good. I thought you did a great job with Derek last week.
I appreciate it.
So good work. Now we have a whopping 11 viewers.
Mm.
Hello. Dropped to 9. I said something and they all disappeared. I don't know what's going on, but down to 7. So I can just see these guys. They're hitting the dislike button, the angry face button, saying, these guys talking too long. Just get to the point.
Right.
All right, here's the deal. Here's the point. The point is that we kick off these lives. We chat for a minute, because that gives everybody a moment to join in the feed before we get to the actual podcast, so that we don't just launch the podcast and then everyone's like, "Whoa, wait, what did I miss?" So that's the point. Those of you that actually stick around, well, you are the true fans. So thanks for being here. I just don't think I finally just got the notification. So now we may actually start seeing some folks jump in. Hey, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, thanks for being here with us for today's Concealed Carry podcast episode. This is episode 409, and this is our monthly, because we do it once a month now, legislative news and issues episode. So today we're going to talk about and share news stories that we've compiled over the last month, basically, because, again, we do it once a month now. And so we're going to share relevant news and issues with regards to the Second Amendment, concealed carry, and all that stuff. And looking forward to it. I mean, there's several good stories here, and one I'm particularly interested in talking about with you, Matthew, is this whole situation out in New York. Now, the story itself is old news at this point. It's like a month old. But to my knowledge, it's still in effect. I think it's still relevant, and it's really interesting to me. And that story is that Remington, the gun manufacturer, offered to the state of New York, sent a letter, I think, or whatever, to Governor Cuomo's office and said, we will make ventilators. We'll completely change everything with our production facility, and we will focus on making ventilators if you tell us that we need, that you need them. Like, if you say you want them, we will build them. And what does the state of New York do? Says, no, you are a non-essential business. You just make guns. Go away.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that one today. Speaking of pro-gun attorneys, Mark Okniansky, another pro-gun attorney. So there's lots of them out there. That's a good thing. All right, guys. Now they're starting to roll in. Now the notifications are getting out there. Now the people are joining. See, this is why we give it a minute and we shoot the breeze and chit-chat and piss some of you guys off. But it gives everybody a chance to get here in time for the podcast.
Number 409, man.
409. It is indeed. There. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's kick off the episode officially. Matthew, give me the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode number 409. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined by Matthew Marister yet again.
Yeah, super happy to be here.
People probably getting tired of seeing you.
Of course, I get tired of seeing myself, man.
You know, here's the deal. Jacob, you probably haven't seen folks in a little while or heard from in a little while because just hasn't always worked out with everybody's schedules. But schedule, you think, well, what's Jacob doing? Like, aren't we in lockdown? So we actually are operating with kind of a half capacity of sorts at the warehouse where everything is shipped from. And in fact, there's some days where we don't even have anybody in there. And so Jacob and I have been going down there and trying to pick up the slack, which we typically go into the warehouse or office location periodically anyway throughout, the week. But lately it's been a little bit more critical. So last week I had to do that and was unavailable for the podcast. And I don't remember what Jacob had going on, but anyway, that's why Matthew did episode 408 all by himself, and I thought you did a great job, buddy.
Oh, I appreciate it. I mean, I don't think you'd say anything else, but I'll take any compliment you give me, man.
To answer the questions on Facebook, Jacob has COVID. No, Jacob doesn't have COVID, or he would not be in the warehouse touching everybody's packages and shipping them out. So, in fact, I'll probably run down there after we're done with the show today to help package things as well, because got to stay on top of those shipments getting out the door. I think we've been doing pretty good. We've been a little bit behind on a few things here and there, but darn this pandemic, everybody's probably tired of hearing about the pandemic, but it is the dominating news story, and everything that we're talking about today, well, almost everything has a bit of a COVID-19 flavor because it has to do with a lot of the things that are happening, laws that are, not so much laws, but, governors' orders and things like that are being issued. And so we're talking about these issues because these are relevant, very important issues. The big legislative news of the day is that the Second Amendment is still a Second Amendment, but we have some government agencies and states and jurisdictions and things really making it difficult to enjoy the Second Amendment. So, today's episode, though, is brought to you by Guardian Nation. We hope that you'll check out guardiannation.com for more information to learn more about the best community for like-minded gun owners to receive training, education, discounts, all kinds of great benefits as part of being a member of Guardian Nation. And new members of Guardian Nation get what we call their starter box, which comes with like $150 worth of gear and product in there. There's training DVDs, there's some cool swag, there's all kinds of cool stuff in the starter box, valued at over $150 just by joining Guardian Nation. You know what? If you decide to join for a month and then cancel, well, that's okay. We'd love for you to stick around, but check it out, learn more, give it a try. GuardianNation.com is where you can learn more. We have a number of members viewing and or listening to the podcast here today, and we love and appreciate you. Don't forget about the Guardian Nation members Facebook group. All right, been kind of quiet in there lately, but we have a whole Facebook group dedicated to members, and great place for people to exchange info and ask questions and share their wealth of knowledge. Today again is the legislative. Today is the legislative news episode. We do this once a month, and today we got a bunch of stories to share. National issues as well as some specific state ones, and I'm looking forward to getting to it with you, Matthew. There's some really important issues to cover.
Yeah, for sure.
So speaking of the first one here, we have this according to NRAILA.org. This is the Institute for Legislative Action at the NRA, which is regardless of what you think about the NRA, the ILA does good work and also does a good job of reporting on these things. And what we know is that the House has introduced a bill known as House Resolution 5717, and I feel like almost every episode for the last month, Matthew, somebody comes in and to the comments on Facebook or YouTube and says, "But what about HR 5717?" And I've been telling everybody for weeks, like, we'll talk about it, okay? So here we are, because this was official, this started to become an issue or more of an issue since the last time we did a legislative news episode. So that's why it's been a while, and it's why I haven't really talked about it much yet. House Resolution 5717, introduced by Representative Hank Johnson from Georgia, also known as the Gun Violence Prevention and Community Safety Act. Of course, it's all about the gun violence and community safety. Anyway, this is nothing new or innovative. As it says here, according to the NRAILA's article for the gun control crowd in Congress, Senator Elizabeth Warren was working on introducing a companion bill in the Senate earlier this year. That went nowhere. And that, I'll be honest, that's kind of the point of what I'm going to get at with talking about it here today, is that this isn't going to go anywhere. Now, this could potentially get through the House. That's possible. I don't know that it will. I definitely still think that there will be some, even Democrat Party House representatives that will not be for this bill, because they're from, believe it or not, there are Democrats that are pro-Second Amendment. There are Democrats that are from districts that are very pro-Second Amendment as far as districts go. So when we're talking about legislation in the House, it becomes a bit more unpredictable as far as what's going to happen. But either way, this would have to go through the Senate as well, which it's already tried to go through the Senate, and I don't even think it even got out of committee. It went nowhere. I don't even know if it got took up by a committee and really, truly. Well, that's not true. There was like an assault weapons ban hearing and stuff a few months ago. So there were some things that were taken up in committee, but although I think that was a House committee yet again. Either way, the Senate is basically the big roadblock to something like this going through. Now, what's in House Resolution 5717? Basically, an assault weapon ban, just like in the that started in the mid 90s and ran up through the mid 2000s. Universal background check requirement nationwide. Red flag laws nationwide. Federal license scheme for all gun purchasers, so everybody would have to have kind of like a Illinois FOID card. Yeah. And other things are included in the bill. So, I mean, we could go into all kinds of, I'm sure we could go into the actual language of the bill and find all kinds of weird, nasty, scary stuff, but I'm not sure that it's really relevant to do so. I mean, the key here is we should not let our guard down, right? Our goal should always be to continue working towards and advancing 2A rights in this country, and by that, it means we don't let our guard down. We stay on top of things. There's a greater risk of things happening locally, probably, in all honesty. And in fact, we're going to talk later on in the show today about one state that just passed a bunch of anti-gun legislation that has been signed into law by their state governor. Many of you probably know who that is or what state that is, but we'll get to that. So, that's where we really especially need to be focused on right now. And it's entirely possible that some things try to get slipped under the cracks of the door because everybody's so focused on COVID-19.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you mentioned Hank Johnson. He's one of my favorite dudes. If you guys don't know who Hank Johnson is, go Google Hank Johnson and Guam. He thought the island was going to flip over and capsize. He's a stellar guy, but the thing
The facetiousness is just bleeding from your eyes as you say this.
The thing is, like a lot of times people say, well, you guys are fear mongering. Like, why are you covering all these news stories and talking about, like, here's the thing, even it doesn't matter how many times these these bills get proposed and shot down and die at different phases, they will always continue to push them. They will just continue. It will not stop. So that's kind of why we always bring it up and say, be alert, be aware, because it's times where national emergencies or other things are going on, that, they take that opportunity to slide this in and say, hey, let's do this along with this under the guise of this, and let's just retool this thing that's been dying, but let's try to resuscitate it in light of what's going on. And so, I don't think either one of us ever tries to be fear mongering or, get you guys to be scared about, stuff like that. It's always just to bring you guys, kind of information and say, hey, this is what's going on in the neighboring state that you might not be aware of, and be aware that your governor may be looking at that and saying, hey, let's try that over here. It died over there, but let's try it here. So,
Yep. And again, I mean, we're seeing some localized issues that are not even legislative ones necessarily, in that, I mean, they are, but they're not in the sense they're going through the normal channel of House or Senate proposing legislation, debating it, committee, putting it through committee and voting on it and all that, and then having a governor sign off on things. So we're talking about governors declaring states of emergency, and that, grants special powers. And frankly, governors have immense power with in emergency situations. They really do, and it's constitutionally backed in a lot of cases. There's broad power in emergency situations. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing: even if a governor or a mayor, but particularly the governors, because again, they have broad power at the state level with situations like what's going on with COVID-19, even if they have the power to impose some severe restrictions with regards to, like Second Amendment type stuff, it doesn't mean that they should, right? Now, we know that the ones that are anti-gun are gonna push the envelope and are probably legitimately going to overstep constitutional limits, even with their broad power that they have in those broad emergency powers. But at the same time, we see governors in other states. I'll be frank, I was a little surprised with how our governor here in Colorado, who's not necessarily considered to be a pro-gun dude, but he hasn't gone too crazy on us with this, and that's a good thing. So, he actually did say that gun businesses are essential businesses. They're allowed to operate, but they've got some pretty strict guidelines that they got to follow to do so. Now, some other concerns, and these are not necessarily even legislative ones, and this mentioned in this NRAILA article about how some prisons are releasing inmates because of COVID-19. Like, somehow it's safer for them to be out of prison than in prison. I mean, okay, I get that people are in tighter quarters than they are outside of prison typically, right? Prisons and a lot of prisons are frankly overcrowded. But it's one of those things, it's like, you don't know what's going to happen. You can't guarantee what's going to happen when they're released. You might have, it's entirely possible that you say, under the guise of COVID-19 safety and prevention, I must release this person from prison, but then he goes out and gets it out of prison. Like, there's just no guarantee you're protecting guys by doing this. And then we run the risk of all kinds of problems. Now, I think a lot of things have been more focused on like white collar type crime, not so much on violent. But I know violent offenders are getting back out on the streets as well. Actually, references a story here in Utah where a recently released inmate broke into a woman's home, threatened her with a knife, and demanded her car, cash, bank cards, and PIN numbers. This is not a surprise. Why? Because you're releasing these guys out on the streets under the guise of COVID-19 safety and prevention. And what are they going to do? They're not going to find a job. There's no jobs to get, not in the broad sense, right? And not only that, I mean, employers like, okay, so go get a job at the supermarket. Supermarkets are, they're one of the more likely places you might find a job right now. There's a lot of overturn and stuff at the supermarkets, and some of them have hired to deal with special demand with because they've been getting hit pretty hard with purchasers. Well, still, because other people are out of work, those employers are able to be a lot more picky about who they hire, right? So, you got resumes in front of you, and you're like, well, this guy doesn't have a record. This guy has a record. Just got out like a week ago. Who are you going to hire, right? So the point is, you're releasing inmates that don't have anywhere to go, don't have anything productive to do. This is a recipe for disaster. Now I got completely derailed. That point is brought up in this article about House Resolution 5717. I'm not really sure what the relevance to that was and why NRA decided to mention that, but it's been something I've been looking at and concerned about. My own sheriff here has released inmates. Mm-hmm. Blows me away. I supported him. He's going to get a letter from me, by the way. Anyway.
Yeah, I got it.
Matthew, stop me talking. So tell us about this. It's not even a story. It's a press release from Attorney General Becerra's office in California. The title is Attorney General Becerra shares resources to combat intimate partner violence during COVID-19.
Yeah, basically, Attorney General of California, Xavier Becerra, released a statement about during COVID-19, obviously people are supposed to stay at home. Well, some people that are in domestic violence relationships or something like that, being home with somebody who's physically, sexually, emotionally abusive to you might not be good. And so what the office, Attorney General's office kind of released was kind of some guidance about what about domestic violence restraining orders that are either in process right now or under, about to expire, and gun violence restraining orders, and that's why we're covering it. But in saying, well, what if you had a restraining order against somebody that you live with because they were, physically abusive, but it's supposed to expire, and this person gets out of jail or they're no longer a restraining order against them, protective order for you, and they come home and now you're forced to be with them, where normally you would be able to go and petition for an extension of that restraining order or whatnot, and now the family courts are closed. You can't process these things or whatnot. So it says here that emergency protective order for domestic violence restraining orders can be applied any time of day or night. They typically last for 7 days. Under current guidance, emergency protective orders during the COVID-19 statewide emergency last for 30 days. The subject of the restraining order can be required to leave the home and stay away from the victim if requested in the order. I don't know. It doesn't say where they're supposed to go. Apparently, they just quarantine themselves in a park. Oh wait, they can't go there. I'm not sure where maybe they get a tent and pitch it on the side of the road because that's not a crime, and I guess in California you can quarantine yourself in a tent. During that period, emergency order is effective. You may apply for longer term restraining order. Judges may issue temporary restraining orders up to 90 days. So that's pretty crazy. And judges may also issue permanent orders that last up to 5 years. So that's crazy. That's for domestic violence restraining orders. Gun violence restraining orders are the red flag law in California generally lasts up to 21 days. Now, these are ex parte restraining orders, meaning that you don't have a chance to go there and petition or say that's bogus information. So up to 21 days and, your gun rights are taken away during a COVID-19 epidemic where police are withdrawing and saying we're only responding to certain types of calls. You're kind of on your own for your own self-protection. Now, this is where it's kind of crazy. It says statewide emergency. All gun violence orders issued or set to expire will be extended up to 90 days to allow the matter to be heard by the court. The subject of the restraining order is prohibited from possessing or buying a gun or ammunition and must give up any guns or ammunition they possess. During the period that emergency order is effective, you or a law enforcement officer may request a hearing for a longer term order. A judge may issue a gun violence restraining order that lasts up to a year. You can also begin the process by submitting forms. So basically, this is setting in motion the ability to extend these orders that may not be based off of any, actual evidence to begin with, and extend them without your input or ability to stop it. And I think anytime we're doing these things, like these cases have to be scrutinized very closely, and it seems like this is making it easier. And I'm not pushing for anybody to have to return to a domestic situation where they're scared to come home. And I'm not downplaying domestic violence. It's a bad thing. And I'm not saying people that, are obvious danger to themselves or others should have access to firearms. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying this opens the gates for some real abuse in I think it just needs to be tightened down, and I see it being loosened up a little bit here, and that's my concern.
Yeah, red flag orders or laws. Talk about slippery slope, right?
Yeah.
It's like we've always been concerned about this potential issue of due process violations, of having rights restricted, but not having the opportunity to be heard within a reasonable amount of time. I suppose it could be argued and it could be taken up in the courts that, well, having your case heard within 21 days is reasonable. All right. Now, we could debate that all day long, but now what I can tell you for sure is not reasonable, this automatic extension of 90 days.
Yeah.
That blows me away, dude. Again, talk about slippery slope, because we set the machine in motion already to allow these gun violence restraining orders to come into play. Now, because there's an emergency, my feeling on it is they should be allowed to expire at the end of 21 days if the freaking courts can't get on, get their stuff figured out. And like, you could have special judges that you probably already should anyway, that this is the only type of case they hear.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just doing stuff virtually all day long. I know there's a lot of court stuff happening right now that's virtually.
Sure.
This is no excuse to say we got to automatically extend these red flag seizures out 90 days.
It's crazy.
That is insane to me, bro. It should just expire. It really should just expire. Now, the thing with domestic violence restraining orders, is it a tool? It's a tool, sure. It's a tool there. What it does is it gives a person legal right that, hey, I don't want to see this dude. He's being, he's really disrupting my life. He's scaring me. I'm obviously saying he because, well, the statistics don't lie. It's mostly men coming after their ladies that don't want anything to do with them anymore. For legit reasons, right? Violence, right? So don't take my words here as meaning that I've taken this light. Actually, I mean to have a very serious conversation about this. It's a tool. It gives you the legal right to have cops, provided they can catch them, arrest an individual, and hopefully that does keep them away from you for a time, because they violated that protection order. But it's not the end all be all. It's just like gun-free zones, right? Where you put up a sign, you say, no guns here, like a school or whatever, and yet we still have school shootings happen, right? So I understand what Attorney General Becerra is doing here, reminding people, hey, a lot more people stuck at home these days. We're probably going to see domestic violence issues tick up. Just a reminder that there's some tools at your disposal that can be used. And here's how we're handling some of these cases because of COVID-19 and the courts not really operating very effectively and all this stuff. Okay, I got it. And then at the bottom of this press release, there's all these resources about these domestic violence hotlines and sexual assault hotlines, suicide prevention hotlines. All of that is great. And in fact, to me, that is the really important stuff. I'll tell you a concern I've had since the get-go with the stay-at-home orders, Matthew, and particularly with schools being shut down. Realizing the statistical, facts about how little this coronavirus seems to impact children, particularly those under the age of 20. I'm not saying they can't impact them. I know for a fact that there's cases that are affecting, in some cases, some pretty young kids that are pretty sick with it. But it's extremely rare, right? Statistically speaking, we're talking about like 0.01% maybe, or maybe even less than that. I mean, it's a very small percentage. My concern is you have these stay-at-home orders, and you've got a lot of kids staying at home with abusive parents that would otherwise have that break that they normally would have during the school day to get away from that situation. Yeah. And you have situations where maybe the parents are gone a lot of times because of work and the kids are at school, and so they avoid some of that abuse at home. But now you have parents out of work or parents ordered to stay at home and kids ordered to stay at home. It actually breaks my heart to think about it. I know there's some really bad child abuse situations going on out there. And there's far more children being negatively impacted by these stay-at-home orders by far. There are kids being killed probably today, unfortunately, in child abuse situations that otherwise, that would not be affected by the disease itself. And I understand there's the spread and all that school. I mean, I don't get sick normally as a person, but when you have 5 kids in a household and most of them going to school and bringing whatever crap they see at school home, I mean, once or twice a year, you get a cold or the flu or whatever, right? Anyway, enough about that. I think the serious conversation to be had is if you're in a situation, regardless of the situation, there are in fact hotlines out there that you can contact and you can get help. There's programs to get women out of situations, to get them away from abusive spouses or partners. There's funding available to assist with this kind of stuff. There's all kinds of things. Child abuse, any of that kind of stuff. If you suspect anything, it should be reported, right? Within reason, right? I'm not talking about you calling on your neighbor because you saw them, I don't know, spank their kid or whatever. Like, spanking is controversial for whatever reason, right? But you know what I mean. We're talking about legit cases. We should not be hesitant to report on legit cases. But the ones that you know about, the ones that are chronic, if you know of any, don't let that crap go. United States Senate. We got Senators Edward Markey and Richard Blumenthal. Mm-hmm. They wrote a letter to the Honorable Regina Lombardo, Acting Director of Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Their letter is basically, it carries no weight, right? It's just purely a couple of senators talking to an executive branch agency saying, we would like for you to do these things. Oh, I should say it's also directed to the director of the FBI as well, Christopher Wray, to both of them. So it's both the FBI and ATF. And they're basically saying, we think because of COVID-19, we have all these concerns about guns ending up in the hands of people they shouldn't. And so how are we going to fix it? Matthew, tell us, what does this letter cover?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things. We'll drill into a couple of the important things, but overall, they want to send information to FFLs as far as saying, look, we know that FFLs are having a huge increase of gun sales to new gun owners. And it goes over and it talks about, hey, FFL, you should be giving guidance to FFLs as far as ensuring that they're not selling firearms to people that they know are prohibited or reasonably believe are prohibited. They should be doing background checks. They should be providing locks or security devices. They should include safe storage information to new gun owners, which is all. I mean, like some of that, sure, providing information, that's great. That's important. But now it goes into an area that's called. So if you go into a gun store, and I don't know if you guys have ever had this happen to you, where you go to purchase a firearm, they run an NCI, a NICS check on you, and it comes back delayed, right? Well, if you wait, they could say, hey, we can wait 3 days, and if we don't get a word back from the system that says yes, we can proceed with this, then we can make the decision to do what's called, I believe it's like a default proceed or something like that, where they will sell you the firearm, they will transfer the firearm to you, even though they haven't received the approved proceed command back. So this is an issue that they brought up, and they said in 2018, more than 270,000 background checks were not completed within 3 business days, resulting in more than 4,800 gun transfers to individuals whose background checks ultimately revealed a gun ownership prohibition. So, and I did the math prior to, it took me about 45 minutes to figure it out, guys. So, but that equates to like 0.17% of default proceeds. So these default proceeds where they didn't get the check back in time, they sold the gun anyways. Less than 1%, about 0.17% of these people were prohibited. Which is still a lot of people, right? Like 4,800 people, still a lot. But given the statistical, effect, it's not a huge number.
By the way, for the record, when that sort of thing happens, right, where a default proceed occurs and the gun's released and it goes to a person that's not supposed to have it, but then later that finally comes back through, there's a process for that individual being contacted and notified and said, you did not pass this background check, you've got to surrender that gun. Okay, so it's not like this is a total it's not like this massive loophole where that those guns are just gone. Like, they may very well be gone, sure, but but it's not like there isn't already a process of sorts.
Yeah, and so in light of that, these senators got together and say, well, what can we do to kind of ensure that those loopholes, because the system's already overtasked, it's not working as quickly as it should, it's overtasked now even more with more gun buyers and more background checks. So what can we do? They ask for the FBI to also pull in information from the NDEX or NDEX, which is a system which pulls in all kinds of other information that is not in the NCIC database, right? And this would include stuff like field interviews, booking records, arrest reports that didn't, result in a conviction. There's all kinds of incident reports, calls for service reports, all kinds of stuff. And so they're saying, in light of, the effect that the fact that the NCIC system is so overwhelmed, in the event where this delayed response is happening and it's taking a day or two, the FBI should also look to these databases and pull in information that might shed some light on whether we should proceed or not proceed. And we kind of went through, Riley and I, before the show, and looked at all the different areas that it pulls from. And Riley, you can kind of fill us all in.
It's concerning for sure. I mean, so you have these two senators trying to tell the ATF and the FBI how to do their jobs, right? Which is not their job. But they're welcome to write a letter. Anybody could write a letter, right? I could write a letter to the FBI director and say whatever. Like, it would go in the trash, I'm sure. But so what they're basically saying is, we think that the FBI, who oversees these background check databases, and orchestrates all of that. I mean, the whole NICS program is the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, right? So like that's an FBI system. And agencies all across the nation refer to that and use that use the programs that come from that, and have access to things like the NCIC, National Criminal Information. What is it? NCIC. I always forget. Too many acronyms.
National Crime
Information Center. Yeah. So which is kind of like a central repository for convictions and all kinds of things, right? So it's true. You and I did look at the Index, the National Data Exchange System, which is just a whole other database, but it pulls in other records. And some of these, and we looked at some of these, and we definitely have some concerns, because what the Index database pulls in can be just simple arrest reports, FIs, right? Field interviews, contacts they've made with people, that kind of stuff. That's what the Index database pulls from. So, like, for instance, even down to calls for service, right? That's just, like, Jesus. And I know that exists, right? Because I've called our local PD, I don't know how many times over the last decade, over little things. Like, we had a car that was like wrecked up onto the sidewalk and into the fence of the there's a baseball field just over, not too far from my house here, and I just happened to notice that one night. I'm like, well, that's not out of the order. That's kind of a odd thing to see. And so I call it in. Hey, wrecked vehicle, abandoned, sitting on sidewalk, pushed into the fence. Right. So, like, I know for a fact that information, those calls are captured, my name, my number, all that, because they ask you for that, right? Like, what's the number we can reach you at? What's your address? What's your name? All that stuff. That's usually about the extent that they go. That's all recorded, and I don't know about all of it, but there's a lot of data that ends up in this Index database, so that law enforcement agencies can, it is useful intelligence. Okay, now debatable whether some people probably hearing this going like, oh my gosh, like if I call 911, like they're gonna record information on me. Yeah, they're gonna record information on you. That might discourage people from calling. Whatever, that's unfortunate. But anyway, so my concern here is that they're saying use this other database as well in making this adjudication of whether we are releasing guns to individuals or not. That, I don't know. That's a bit concerning to me. Because now, what are we actually looking at? What are we looking at in that database? What the agency's looking at? That's critical information to make that determination, right? And looking at simple, particularly misdemeanor arrests or anything like that is there's no reason to even look at that, even especially if you haven't even been convicted yet. Not that a misdemeanor conviction precludes you from buying a gun. Certain ones do, right? Specifically misdemeanor convictions where in your particular state you would have to serve over 2 years in prison. Misdemeanor DV convictions, those are very specific types. But we're talking about a database that pulls in all kinds of data, low-level data. So incident, arrest, booking reports, pretrial investigations, supervised release reports. That could include, by the way, the NCIC also includes some of that information as well. Calls for service, photos, field contact and identification records, blah, 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 blah.
What about things like a state-issued medical marijuana license, or a misdemeanor weed arrest?
I don't know if that kind of stuff goes into the Index, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, if you were FI'd, if you had a field interview, police officer stops you and they're like, hey, I'm not going to arrest you for you less than an ounce of marijuana you're smoking in the park, but I'm just going to advise you, hey, you can't do it out here, blah blah blah. You don't have your license.
Is a great field interview point. That is a great point, and that is exactly where this could be concerning for sure. Matt says just call non-emergency from a payphone. Refuse to identify yourself. Well, yeah, I mean, you don't have to provide information when you call, right? You don't. So particularly if you call non-emergency, so if you want to call and give information and then refuse to provide information, that's fine, But although he says do it from a payphone, I don't remember the last time I saw a payphone. So anyway, we talk about this because, hey, it's relevant. This is where the minds of the anti-gunners go. Okay, this provides intelligence for all the rest of us in our fight for 2A rights down the road. Like, this is where the minds are going. Okay, these anti-gunners. All right, they're always looking out for opportunities where they can continue to deny people access to the Second Amendment. So, anyway. Next story. Trump administration prepares to abolish one of America's biggest gun-free zones. So on a happier note, the Trump administration has published a proposed rule to end a ban on the possession of firearms in water resource development projects administered by the Army Corps of Engineers. These areas comprise one of the largest networks of outdoor recreation sites in America, encompassing more than 400 lake and river projects in 43 states. Activities that occur on these sites include hiking, boating, fishing, camping, hunting, and geocaching. Currently, and this has been the rule for a long time, possession and use of firearms in some of these areas has been restricted to hunting or a few designated shooting ranges. But to just across the board get rid of any of restrictions whatsoever, just say, hey, it's public land. Mm-hmm. Right? It's no different than BLM land, U.S. Forest Service land, whatever. But these are specific land areas that are under the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's wise. I mean, these people that get jammed up in these areas probably aren't doing anything overtly illegal, right? Other than a statutory, hey, you can't carry that here. They're probably carrying it in an otherwise legal fashion. They're able to carry it.
The government shouldn't make any assumption that, what does that even matter, right? Right. It's a form of a massive outdoor gun-free zone, and it's stupid. And this is an example of government overreach, that just an inconsistency, right? Because there's no rules really about possession of firearms and carrying concealed and all that stuff on U.S. Forest Service land, BLM land. I mean, heck, we can even carry in national parks, national monuments now, provided your state that park is is within allows it. But so it's just another example of one of these weird rules that somehow it came out of who knows what, some regulation, some bill somewhere, whatever, that somebody put it in there somewhere that, well, we can't have people carrying guns on these Army Corps of Engineer projects.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
But thanks, Donald Trump.
Yeah. Hey, credit, we should give credit where credit's due. And while Trump has done some things that have ticked me off, the whole bump stock thing and all that, led by his administration, bunch of crap. But hey, if he's doing the right thing over here, that's good. Okay, we should recognize that. Mm-hmm. That's why we talked about it on the podcast today. GunsAmerica.com has an article I came across. It's actually, it's a few weeks old now at this point, but it's still relevant. All right, this is still an ongoing issue. The title of the article is New York suspends pistol permitting, shuts down Remington in response to COVID-19. New York, like a number of other states that have issued stay-at-home orders and have classified businesses as, certain businesses as essential and non-essential. Well, in New York, Remington has been classified. Remington's this is a massive gun manufacturer. I think one of the largest, if not the largest. It's a this is a huge plant based in Ilion, New York. I probably didn't pronounce that right, but I feel like anytime we're talking about the Northeast, the Southeast, or Texas, the people will be like, that's not how you say it, bro. Anyway. So Remington Arms was deemed a non-essential business. The irony of this is that Remington very publicly even sent a letter to the state government saying, we will switch over our tooling, our production facility, our capabilities, or everything we're doing, we'll switch that over to making ventilators if you think that would help. Which by that alone and by its nature would mean that Remington would then become an essential business regardless of what the government states. But they basically said, we will do this if you will, if you need these ventilators. And New York state government's been silent. No response. No acceptance. And it's not a surprise, frankly. I mean, I'm sure Governor Cuomo would not want his supporters to get, to see the news story, because it would come out that, Governor Cuomo working with Remington Arms Company to make ventilators. I mean, the sad thing is it gets all political, right? When it should all be like, hey, we're all in, we're all chipping in, we're all trying to help. And there's a lot of other gun manufacturers and other gun companies or gun industry, related companies that are doing all kinds of things. We talked about Allen Company doing that just last week, I think, on the podcast, in the industry news segment. And this is kind of an industry news story as well, but sort of legislative as well. So it kind of, it ended up in today's episode instead. So just amazing irony here, right? Like, we're willing to help, we're willing to do this, but at the same time, Remington is shut down as being a non-essential business.
Yeah, it's crazy. When I read this, I thought when we covered it last, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, maybe a week ago, I said, I'm not gonna assume that Cuomo doesn't want Remington's help with this. And that he would accept help during this pandemic from any company that was, in good faith wanting to help. But now, it kind of appears as though that my gut feeling that he would reject, or just, not answering, kind of give his answer and then go as far as to force them to shut down when they are a huge part of that economy and employ a huge number of people in that area. It shows the ugliness of political partisanship above all else. And it's just disgusting to say, I don't care about the workers there. I don't care about their families. I don't care about the good that they could have done by making these things. I don't like guns. I don't want it next to my name, so I'm going to shut them down. It's sad. It really is a sad story.
So on the one hand, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, how is it that they're not an essential business? So they're making, guns, and guns are 2A protected, and people have a right to buy guns and should be able to buy guns and all that. Realize, again, I started off earlier in the podcast by talking about how governors have very broad emergency powers. All right, now we there's all kinds of debate we could do on this, but it's not ultimately. It's not even for us to decide. I mean, just because I'm just telling you what the reality is, it doesn't necessarily mean this is my position or this is what I believe or that I support this. I'm just acknowledging the fact that governors have great powers. And, when we realize that governors have the power, okay, again, keep in mind that this is this is just what's happening, and I think that there is some precedent to this as well. When they have the power to shut down churches, church gatherings, and things like that, like they have in some states. They have here in Colorado, right? When we're talking about like a suspension of First Amendment rights, why should we think that wouldn't extend also to even Second Amendment rights, right? Again, I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just saying that you see the logic here. If we're able to suspend certain First Amendment rights, why would we think the Second Amendment would also, or would not also, be extended protections? It's a whole sticky mess, this whole thing, this COVID-19.
And you mentioned the power that they have. I don't know if you happen to see it, or that maybe the listeners saw. There was an interview with the New Jersey governor, Phil Murphy, and he was asked about, because he closed down, churches and things like that, and said, "Hey, are you concerned that you're violating people's First Amendment constitutionally protected right to assembly and to practice their religion and stuff?" And he said, "Hey, that's above my pay grade. I wasn't even thinking about the Bill of Rights on that." And I'm thinking, wow, that sums up the feeling of all the people that are saying, wait a second, I'm all for like doing my part to slow the curve or flatten the curve and all this stuff. But if you're not even considering the Bill of Rights and our constitutionally protected rights, when you do these things, that's concerning. It should be concerning. And so that's not the answer you want from your governor.
Yep. You know, I saw a meme. This reminds me, this whole discussion reminds me of this meme I saw just this morning. It's kind of like a caricature type, meme. And on the one hand, had the quote, give me liberty or give me death. And on the other hand, it's like, I think it said like 1776 and then, 2020. Give me liberty or give me death. And then says, take my liberty or else we're all going to die. You know what I mean? It is quite an interesting dichotomy of sorts. And that's the thing, all of this should be done with balance in mind. Declaring an emergency and taking certain actions to try to prevent that emergency from getting to become more of an emergency, or and really get out of hand. Like there's a point where we have to balance. It's not black and white. Like we want it to be black and white, but these are very complex issues. I know some of you are saying, some of you are screaming at your radios right now, and what are you talking about? It's not complex. No, it is complex. Okay. I'm not saying I agree that First and Second Amendment rights and all these things should be, violated and suspended and stuff. But just that there are a lot of complex issues at play. Like nobody wants a bunch of people to get really, truly sick and die. Right? At the same time, we don't want our economy shut down for all this period of time and the negative effects that come from that as well. It's just, there's a lot of things kind of competing for attention here, and we got to try to do our best to protect rights and balance all of that as well. So it's I don't envy, by the way, I don't envy anybody in government leadership right now. Not at all. Like I wouldn't want anything to do with any of this stuff. I would not, because almost no matter what you do, you're going to be unpopular, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because either you're going to be unpopular because you go too far, or you're going to be unpopular because you don't go far enough. We see that already with the way President Trump is treated, right? In the beginning there was things he was being accused of doing that was going too far, like shutting down the border and stuff, and then at the same time, well, he didn't go far enough, right? So it's just it's a whole big mess. Anyway, let's look at a couple specific state issues. First off, New Mexico. In New Mexico, the NRA is suing, and other pro-2A groups are suing the New Mexico governor, Michelle Lujan, I don't even know how you say her last name, Lujan Grisham, who, by the way, is someone that's been talked about as being a potential running mate for Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. All right. She's very anti-gun. She supported assault weapon bans and things like that, and has not been shy about some of those issues. She prohibited gun stores and shooting ranges from operating under her order, and that has been taken to court. All right. So now when that'll happen, well, that's a big question, right? Because courts aren't moving very fast right now. And that's one of the challenges with this kind of thing. By the time this might even get before a judge, we could be, the whole situation could be done and over with. And at that point, it's like, well, is it really worth continuing to, in this fight? And it may just get thrown out anyway, because the judge may go, well, okay, I see your point, but you know what? Everything is back to normal again. So, this is pointless. Let's toss it out. So, anyway, just an interesting story there, and this is just another one of the examples of state governors that have probably gone, in my opinion, they have gone too far with restricting guns and Second Amendment type stuff from occurring. Matthew, tell us about this. Really, it's like a press release from the Attorney General's office of the state of West Virginia. This is more positive news. So we kind of have, good, bad, good, bad.
Very positive. So from West Virginia, Attorney General Morrissey, he introduced continuity of Second Amendment rights during pandemic, and we kind of mentioned this earlier in the chat section when we were talking about, hey, if they're going to extend these red flag orders, are they also going to extend people's, concealed carry licenses that might have expired during this time and that way? Well, anyways, in West Virginia, you don't need a concealed carry license to carry in the state. But they do obviously issue it because other states have reciprocity with other states, right? So what the Attorney General said is, hey, we're going to process mail-in applications for concealed carry licenses. There's nothing in the statute that says that you have to apply in person, so we'll still continue to process those. And he sent directives to all the sheriffs to say, yeah, this is how we're going to implement it, and this is what we're going to do. And it's good because he didn't have to, right? Like, they didn't have to do that. There's no requirement that they have a concealed carry license for their own, population, but they're thinking long term and saying, hey, eventually, these people might want to leave their house and go to another state, and I think that's a really good thing. So we don't mean to paint gloom and doom for everything, because there are some beacons of positiveness, some of these governors and attorney generals working together and stuff.
Yep. Awesome. Way to go, West Virginia.
Yeah.
When I first saw the press release, I just saw Charleston. It says it's, which is the capital of the state of West Virginia. And I immediately started thinking Charleston, South Carolina, right? And I was like, wait a minute. Am I reading this right? Oh, wait, West Virginia. That makes more sense. Now turning our attention to Virginia. The Virginia governor signed background checks, a red flag law, and other gun control bills into law. Why don't you take the lead on this one as well, Matthew?
Yeah, good old Ralph Northam. Dude wore a Klan robe, or, pushing infanticide. Those types of things aren't very controversial, apparently, but this might be controversial to some people. He signed 5 gun measures into law, including background checks and extreme risk protective orders. So basically, those bills that he was trying to get earlier, when they did not have Democratic control of the legislation, they finally got Democratic control of everything, and now these gun laws are rolling out, and it's pretty sad. So just real quick, they signed the extreme risk protective order, the red flag order, like it says 19 other states, so in Washington D.C. So they got that into effect down there in Virginia. Also signed a bill requiring background checks, so the universal background check that you hear about. He also signed a bill that requires a person to report the loss of a firearm within 48 hours or face civil penalty of up to $250. Not sure how that makes people safe, but it certainly makes the government money. And one that raises the punishment for leaving a loaded, unsecured firearm that endangers anyone under the age of 14. If you're over the age of 14 and it endangers somebody, sorry, it's not, you're out of luck. But his statement is, we lose too many Virginians to gun violence. It's past time, and it is past time we took bold, meaningful action to make our community safer. Now, he didn't say how fining people $250 if they don't report their gun being stolen is going to make people safer, or universal background checks, or extreme risk protective orders, or increasing a law or a punishment for leaving a firearm that endangers somebody under the age of 14. I'm not sure anybody who leaves a gun out that endangered somebody that was under the age of 14 would be dissuaded from leaving that loaded gun out if they knew the punishment would be much greater. I just don't think these are incidents that are accidental or negligence, and I don't think either one of those are curtailed by a stiffer punishment. I just don't see it. So I don't think I really don't think any of these laws are particularly aimed at taking bold, meaningful action to make communities safer. I just think it's more gun control, a little notch in the belt, like, look what I did.
Well, of course they're not. I mean, but we already know this, and we've talked about these things. We've talked about all the stuff going on in Virginia. Of course, there was the whole huge rally in January in Virginia against all of these gun control bills, and of course, the assault weapons ban one was defeated, at least for now. It was basically said that this issue is tabled. We'll pick it up next year or next session. So the fact is if we talked about we had this conversation way back in November in the podcast, recognizing that Virginia took a huge loss in the last election, huge, and the implications of that were going to be profound and long, fairly and long lasting, right? Meaning that there's some things, and we're seeing the fruits of all that come to light now. That this is the consequences of not doing a good job, I guess, of getting the right people elected into state offices. You end up with this. You end up with laws like this getting passed, and it'll be harder to get these sorts of things overturned. Because there's multiple battles that have to be won, right? We have to win the next election, which that usually doesn't happen. It doesn't usually flip-flop that fast, right? But you got to do that. Then you got to win it by enough of a margin that you have a chance of getting things pushed through. You got to hopefully win the governor's seat back, all that stuff, right? With pro-gun legislators and governors. And then you got to finally get the laws actually, the bills written and passed and all through all that process. So, I mean, this is the result of a utterly, completely failed system of campaigning and elections and government in the state of Virginia. And it's sad to see. And my heart goes out to those of you in Virginia that are living with this, dealing with this. Now, it's not like things are all that different, frankly, from you guys to me here in Colorado. We've lost some battles as well, and some of that may not be done and over with. I'm very, very, very concerned about upcoming bills. Things have been kind of put on the back burner because of COVID-19, but when this all gets resolved, I think they're just going to pick up those torches, and especially when you have, I know there's people here in Colorado that are looking at Virginia and going, okay, look, they're able to get that accomplished. Now it's our turn. Now it's time for us to push this through as well. Very, very, very concerning. And that's why we can't let our guard down. I said that earlier in the show. I know I said that HR 5717, guys, you can keep spewing that all across Facebook and talking about it. I don't think it's going anywhere. Look more locally, look more inward at yourselves and at your local jurisdictions, your cities, your counties, and your states, and look for these types of issues and get involved. And here's the thing. So often we think getting involved in the political process means, well, when the time comes, I'm going to sling my rifle over my back, I'm going to carry openly, and I'm going to march on down to the Capitol and have a big rally. That's not politically getting, it's getting involved somewhat, right? It's making a statement, it's assembling publicly, and all of that is fine and well and dandy. But what's more important is you actually getting involved in the the actual political process, party processes, right? Committee work. As far we're talking party committee work, right? There's all kinds of committees and all kinds of organizations and all kinds of local groups getting involved with whether it's the primary process or a caucus process. That's huge. I'm always appalled every time I show up at my caucus meetings to see how few, I know how many people live in my caucus, and there's 16 people there. And it's always the same old dudes and ladies. It's always the same old people. I'm like the one young guy, and I'm almost 40. I'm like the one young guy in there. That's sad, right? Out of a dozen people, and I've been elected as going to the various state or congressional or county caucus those caucus meetings, right? That's where that's the most basic form of how some of these decisions get made, and which candidates get selected, and who ends up running against the other guy. Right? It's all part of a process, and it's talking to your neighbors and being good stewards and good ambassadors for good, solid foundational principles that this country was founded upon, and not being so like R against D and D against R. It's just getting involved and being good ambassadors and working towards good. Anyway, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
I agree.
But when we don't do that and we have failed political processes, we end up like Virginia.
Yep.
And some of you are saying, but I'm in this state and that's not going to happen here. Don't even begin thinking that way. Because 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I'm sure that's what they thought about here in Colorado. It changes fast. All right. It's time to wrap it up. Sorry. Went too long. But guys, this is the Concealed Carry Podcast, and we've been doing this a long time now, and we couldn't do it without your support and your support of sponsors and of the products and things we mention on the podcast. And so I do appreciate your support. I mean, we don't do Patreon. We don't do these other, we don't do special episodes that only subscribers get access to, and, paying subscribers, for instance. We don't do that stuff. We just ask that you support our business in some small way, somewhere, sometime, or maybe ongoing. Maybe you become a Guardian Nation member. Maybe you just, check out our website, our store at concealedcarry.com, and, place an order here and there. These are difficult times, and I recognize that, but the need for training and information and quality gear doesn't go away. And so, appreciate your support. That's all I got to say. And we'll do our best to serve you and have good customer service, a good positive customer experience for all of you. And then by staying in business, we're able to continue doing things like the Concealed Carry Podcast and all the other. I forgot to mention, Matthew. It was my bad. I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show, our whole podcast network. We got the Concealed Carry Podcast. We got the Law Dog Shooting Sports Podcast. We got the Firearm Trainers Podcast. Not Your Average Gun Girls Podcast. All right. Your support of all those shows support us and support our team here and our guys. We've been fortunate. We haven't had to lay anybody off yet. And that's because we've got wonderful, loyal fans and people and customers that have continued to support us. And I hope that'll continue. And so that's all I got to say about that. Matthew wouldn't have a job if, we couldn't keep the lights on here.
It's true. And so, obviously you're talking about the fans and how much, the listeners and those people that support us, and we are very grateful. And one of the ways we like to say thank you is to do our weekly giveaway, right? So
yes, thank you.
I think we're
already over time, so we better do this quick.
Yeah, we can definitely do it. So I have it pulled up, actually.
Okay. All right. So here's the drum roll. Ready?
All right. You guys ready?
What are we winning?
We are going for the Door Ambush course digital download.
Door Ambush DVD. All right.
Yep.
Or not the DVD. You said it's the digital.
Download.
Got it.
We'll send
because we're too cheap to send you the actual DVD, apparently.
Unless you have a DVD player and you prefer, we can certainly facilitate that, I'm sure.
I'm just teasing. All right. So here's a drum roll for a winner of Door Ambush.
The winner is Ian, and your last name starts with an M. Ian M. We will send you an email, Ian.
Sweet.
Congratulations.
Congrats, Ian. Thanks for participating in this week's giveaway, guys. Don't forget to sign up each week at concealedcarry.com/podcast prize.
Yep.
And you may have a chance to win next week's prize, which is what?
Next week's prize will be 1 month of LASR software.
1 month free of the LASR software. Awesome. And how do you get signed up again? concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. And don't forget, you earn extra entries by following all the steps in that sign up. All right. For the podcast giveaway. Guys, we appreciate you. Stay safe wherever you are, and don't let up with your training. Get out there if you can to the range and shoot and practice, or do it right at home doing dry fire. So a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care. Guys, those of you still with us, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Mark, no, we don't have the machine gun drum roll because I'm not going to go into it with you, but I don't have all the equipment working that makes that possible. It just, sorry. It's been that way for a while. I apologize, Mark. Let's see here. There was one other thing I wanted to address here. There was a comment. Mark says, young guy, good one, Riley. I'm not a spring chicken, that's for sure. You know, Matthew's older than me too. He knows what I'm talking about. I wake up in the morning. I have sore joints and muscles and things that I didn't used to have. I know that way worse is coming. But my point is like when I'm the only guy under 65 at my caucus meeting, it's like, what in the heck? Where is everybody?
So they basically say, "Hey, how many good hips do we have here? You have two,
right?
You're the point man.
Can you make it to the state caucus? Can you get up the ramp into the building?"
I kid. I'll be there.
You know, and it usually goes like this because we have to select, our various representatives, and they're like, "All right, do we have any nominations?" And everybody like looks around at each other. Okay, anybody want to do it? Any volunteers? And like a couple of times, I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Yep, I'll go. And then I end up being the, congressional, county, and state delegate. It's like, there could be 3 different people, but I end up like representing all of that because nobody else wants to do it. You're like, you raise your hand and they're like, okay, do I have a nomination or do I have a second for that? Right. Second, all in favor, all hands go up. He is our tribute. He is our sacrifice, our human sacrifice. And it's kind of sad that the process is like that sometimes because people are too involved in themselves to get involved early on in the process. That was my point.
Yes.
So it's too late when we're actually casting votes in the general election. It's too late when we're showing up on the steps and protesting. I'm not saying don't do those things. I'm absolutely saying do those things. I'm just saying that you missed the boat in the very beginning to get good quality candidates. That's how you end up with situations like you did because there was like candidates in Virginia that weren't even opposed or they had really crappy candidates. And that just says that people failed to get good candidates on the ballot in the first place. That's a shame. Anyway. Sweet tea, Crown Royal, peach, heaven in a mason jar. I wouldn't know. I don't drink any of those things. But I have drank out of a mason jar. Just water,
Yeah, that's what we have. Right?
That's
what we use.
Yeah, oh, that's right. That's right. And my sister does the same thing. We have a lot of mason jars in the Bowman household, but they're all like used for canning. Like they actually put food in them.
Oh, right.
My wife cans. I pretend to help. My children are more helpful than I am, probably. I'm sorry. I was scrolling back. I was trying to find something. There was something I wanted to address off air, and I don't remember what it was now. So we'll probably let you guys all go, and we appreciate you so much. And we'll see you back here Thursday. So, toodaloo. Until next time.